In 2009, the New Orleans Saints raised up their first ever Lombardi Trophy, and Drew Brees raised up his first ever Super Bowl MVP. And ever since that day, the Saints were always in contention to win another Super Bowl, and their best chance was back in 2020. But Drew Brees had a off-throwing shoulder, and he was a little bit older and just not the same player. But I think back in 2013, they had a way better team, a well-rounded team, better coaching, and overall a better team than a Super Bowl winning team. But they came up short in the playoffs. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about the 2013 New Orleans Saints. So the story begins in 2009. After the Saints won their first ever Super Bowl, Drew Brees was on top of the world, and the future for this organization looked very, very bright. And actually, they followed up with a pretty decent season. They had a little bit of a step back, going from 13-3 to 11-5 in 2010. In the wild card round, they played the Seattle Seahawks, which they gave up 41 points, and they lost 36-41. And we know Marshawn Lynch had that historical, iconic run versus the Saints. That was the game. I had no idea it was that game until doing this research. And this is a common theme within this video, is that the defense gave up way too many points in the playoffs. And even during the Super Bowl run, their defense, scoring wise, was not all that good. Now, as you can see right here, in 2009, they had the 7th worst passing yard, but they had the top 3 in interceptions and passing touchdowns given up. But rushing wise, it was not the best. 3rd worst in touchdowns, but 12th, about middle of the pack in rushing yards. But their takeaways was their bread and butter. Guys like Tracy Porter, Jabari Greer, and with the old timer and Darren Sharper with 9 interceptions that year, their bread and butter was taking the ball away. And in 2010, they did not do all that good at taking the ball away, being 20th overall at takeaway, which is a huge drop off from the year previous. But their rushing defense got a little bit better. Their passing defense got, I guess you could say, a little bit of a step back, but their points per game actually went up at 7th. But in the wild card round, they gave up 41 points to the Seattle Seahawks, which is a pretty decent offense at the time. But that's a common theme. And so in 2011, this team was supposed to take off again and have that 2009 Super Bowl winning season again. They still have a really strong core offensively with Drew Brees, Jimmy Graham, and they're drafting guys like Mark Ingram and stuff like that. They have a really strong offense because throughout these years, Drew Brees is playing phenomenal at an MVP high level. Drew Brees has always played at an MVP high level. In 2009, 4,300 yards, 34 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. He had a 70% completion rate. He was 2nd in the MVP voting. In 2010, although it was a down year for the team, he had a little bit of a dip back also. 4,600 yards again, which is more than 2009. 33 touchdowns, 22 interceptions, and a 68.1 completion percentage. But in 2011, 5,400 yards, 46 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, 71% completion rating. Bro was balling out. You can see this offense, they're always top 5, top 3 in scoring each and every year. But the defense, on the other hand, in week 1, they traveled to the Super Bowl winning defending champions, Green Bay Packers, and they gave up 42 points in a loss. So you can already tell this is going to be a long season. They gotta play better defense. And I think it's also really important just to point out the fact that they were getting some really good defensive pieces in the draft. And their first one was back in 2008. In the second round, they got Tracy Porter. Obviously, he caught the game-sealing interception touchdown. And then in 2009, they did not have a lot of draft capital. They only had a first round and then 2 fourth rounders and a 5th rounder. But in the first round, they got Malcolm Jenkins with the 14th pick. Obviously, he was a gem. Dude was a beast in the NFL. Obviously, beast with the Eagles. But in 2010, they got 2 really good defensive pieces. With the first round pick, they got Patrick Robinson. As you can see right here, he was getting cooked versus Green Bay. But in the 4th round, they got Al Woods, a really solid defensive tackle who is still in the NFL. Obviously, he's more so of a journeyman now. But in the 3rd round, they got Jimmy Graham, and this was Drew Brees' most popular target during these years. Jimmy Graham in 2011, he had a historic, really great year. As you can see right here, he had 1,300 yards in his second year. You know, he had about 100 receptions. Bro was balling out with 11 touchdowns. So it's just Drew Brees is now pretty much his favorite target now, because Marquise Colston, although he's a very underrated receiver, is nothing wrong with having multiple good receivers. So I like that. But going into 2011, that draft, they did really, really good in the first round. They got Cameron Jordan with the 24th overall pick, and then 4 picks later, they got Mark Ingram. As we know, both of these players, phenomenal players in the Saints organization, especially Cameron Jordan. He is still on the team, getting 10 plus sacks every season, but they were really crucial players because, again, the defense needed some youth. Guys like Jabari Greer, he's getting older. Sharper, he's getting older. Like, I think he retired at this point. Jonathan Vilma, like, all these guys are getting a lot older, and you need some fresh legs on the defensive side of the ball. You definitely want to mix between veterans and rookies and youngsters, so they can learn things like that. So I like what they're doing on the defensive side, but it really is coaching. And again, in 2011, they went 13-3, but defensively they were just not all that good. And we've seen it on full display in both playoff games, because in the wildcard round versus the Detroit Lions, they gave up almost 400 passing yards to Matthew Stafford. And yes, Matthew Stafford and Calvin Johnson, a dynamic duo, but 400 passing yards, man, that is insane. Although they won 45-28 in the divisional round, they had a complete meltdown in the fourth quarter. Alex Smith and the San Francisco 49ers, they went crazy in that fourth quarter. They scored 36 points and lost 36-32, but they had a complete meltdown. You can also blame the offense, which I really can't blame them too much, mainly because they did their job marching down the field after the first touchdown and then just scoring, get the lead. But that second touchdown at the end of the game, I completely blame that on the defense. So in 2012, they finally got rid of Greg Williams, thank God, mainly because he just wasn't cutting it, and they brought in Steve Spagnuolo, the guy who coaches the Kansas City Chiefs right now. Really good coach or whatever, but in the 2012 season, he did not do any better from Greg Williams, if not worse, because the Chiefs have the second worst scoring defense, giving about 28 points per game, and in the very first game of the season versus a rookie in RG3, and they gave up 40 points. And in week 2 versus the Panthers, 35 points. In week 3, 27 points. And in week 4, 28 points. All were losses, man. And pretty much, if we look down the season, they gave up 52 points to the New York Giants. They gave up 31 points to the Niners. And the last game of the season, 44 points to the Carolina Panthers. And pretty much just a throwaway season for this organization. Definitely just terrible. Offensively, Drew Brees was still balling out, had about 5,100 yards, over 40 touchdowns, and again, another historic year for Drew Brees. But this time, they did not make the playoffs, being 7-9, and this is where we come to 2013. Because immediately after the last game of the season, they went ahead and fired Steve Spagnuolo. See you later, alligators, what they basically told him. And they brought in a really good defensive coordinator in Rob Ryan, the brother of Rex Ryan. If you didn't know that, the guy who used to coach the New York Jets. And if you didn't know, Rob Ryan used to coach the Oakland Raiders. He used to coach the Cleveland Browns and the Dallas Cowboys. And I think he was a positional coach for the Patriots on those Super Bowl winning teams in the early 2000s. So he definitely has some experience with the Raiders. He had Nnamdi Asomugha, Charles Woodson, and all those guys. So he definitely knows what he's doing. So they immediately got to work, and one of the first things that they did was Rob Ryan, he input a 3-4 defense rather than have a 4-3 defense, which just means having 3 base D linemen and 4 linebackers, 2 of which going to be in the interior, and then 2 are going to be outside linebackers. And last year in 2012, they brought in David Hawthorne and Curtis Lofton. I think Curtis Lofton was from the Falcons, and yeah, David Hawthorne, who was from the Seahawks, I believe. And both these guys had breakout seasons in 2013. More specifically, David Hawthorne, as you can see right here, David Hawthorne, he had 91 total tackles. He had 3 sacks, 8 tackles for loss. So bro was definitely balling out. Him being that interior linebacker position really helped him out a lot. Another guy that blew up was Junior Galette. Gillette. He had 12 total sacks, man, that year. He could have made a Pro Bowl, but the NFC is just loaded with defensive end talent. And another guy that really blew up was Keenan Lewis. And although he did play for the Steelers, he had a career high in 4 interceptions, and so this doesn't even account for the rookies or the young guys who were still coming in and still developing 1 or 2 years. And one of those players was like Hakeem Hicks. Now, yes, Hakeem Hicks did not play as much in 2012, his rookie season, but in 2013 he had a really solid year with about 5 sacks at the edge position. And the rookie that they brought in 2013 was Kenny Varco, a really solid cover safety who doesn't really get talked about too much in today's league, even though he retired. But when he was playing, he was a really solid cover safety. I actually love his game a lot. And on top of that, they brought in Kenny Stills, which Kenny Stills, he was a late draft pick, and he came in instantly and just balled out. And I get it, they don't know what's going to happen in 2013, but I think going to 2013, they have a new identity defensively. They brought in some new faces, and it's time to get set. And how did they do? They went 11-5, and finally, the defense is top 5 in scoring defense, not giving up a whole lot of points. Again, finally top 5. The offense took a major dip back. Although Drew Brees had another 5,000-yard season, almost 40 touchdowns, the one area that really struggled was the running game. Now, yes, I do understand that Peter Carmichael is not a running back friendly guy, who likes to utilize his running backs in the power form and run up the gut with them every now and then. Or no, he likes to use them in the passing game and things like that, which obviously helped Drew Brees and with the offense. But another thing that really held this team back was simply they just could not win on the road. Because in 2013 they went 3-5 on the road, and to make it even worse, in most of those losses on the road, they had the ball less than half the game, which is under 30 minutes. And if you had a running back, probably could help you out more to control the game a lot more. But besides that, they did make the playoffs, and that's really all that mattered. And in the wild card game, they played my Philadelphia Eagles. And in that game, they actually shut down the run game versus the Eagles. And if you don't remember, in 2013, the Eagles, we had a top 5 offense. We had LaShawn McCoy. We had Nick Foles in his prime going crazy. But, they actually shut us down completely that game, which they allowed only 80 rushing yards versus a top 5, top 3 rushing team. And on top of that, the Eagles, we went 3 for 12 on third down. We could not move the ball. We had numerous 3-and-outs. The Saints defense was balling out. Now, yes, at the end, they almost made a comeback versus the Saints, but ultimately we did lose that game. So it was time for them to go to Seattle and play the historic Seattle Seahawks defense, and let's see how they do. The Saints actually struggled a lot this game. Now, first things first, this is not a prime Russell Wilson 2018-19 MVP conversation Russell Wilson. No, this is a young second year, maybe third year Russell Wilson, and the offense was ran through by Marshawn Lynch. He had about 140 yards on like 24 carries, and they knew that he was getting the ball. The Saints knew he was getting the ball every single time, and they still could not stop him. And the thing is, on the Saints offense side of the ball, they had numerous errors. Mark Ingram had a costly fumble, and the offense they did not look the same as they did all season long or the years prior. And another thing that really held back this team was Drew Brees. He was absent in the first half. He only had about 34 total passing yards in the first half. And although he had about 310 yards in the game total, 34 passing yards in the first half is horrific. And the fact that they couldn't score, they barely got first downs and things like that, the team really did struggle in that first half. And had they just had a field goal or even a touchdown in that first half, it would have changed the game in so many different ways. Now, you can blame weather. That is a valid argument, but I really don't think so. Drew Brees has been in the league for a long time at this point. It makes no sense why you're playing this bad. But with all that being said, folks, this is going to be the end of this video. I pretty much made this video just to talk about some of the teams that I used to watch growing up. I remember watching the Saints and their high-flying offense when Drew Brees was really healthy and throwing for 4 or 5,000 yards. I remember these times, and I just want to revisit and to see, how I was back in 2013. It's crazy because it's really been 10 years since this happened, and about 14 years since the Saints won their first Super Bowl. So I just want to revisit that. If you got like this content, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, man. We are out, man. Peace.